and with me are Miss Henson and Mr. Schumann. And here in just a second, Cailin's going to give her thesis, and then we'll do some questioning, and then in a little less than an hour, she'll get to turn the tables on us and ask us a question. So let me pray real quick, and then we'll begin. Dear God, thank you for this day, and I thank you for Cailin. I thank you for her heart and all the energy and effort and blood, sweat, and tears that she's poured into her career here at MCA. I pray that you give her strength, that you speak through her, that we're able to have a good time and take something valuable away from this time together. I just pray that we glorify you in this time and continue to do all things for you. In your name pray. Amen.
Mythology and folklorism are irrevocably ingrained in human society and culture. Humans use them as a means to explain what they did not or could not know or comprehend. However, after the Age of Enlightenment, superstition and folktales have largely been put on the back burner for modern science. That being said, both science and the supernatural can help us better understand the world God created. Science is defined as the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. For centuries, humans have used science to study and learn more about the natural world we live in. It has been a tool we have utilized to temporarily satisfy our curiosity and a method to help understand our relentless flow of questions on how the world works. Science gradually came to replace superstition and the supernatural as an answer to the unknown, giving logical explanations for the illogical. For instance, modern research and testing has been able to prove that most cases and incidents of vampire epidemics in North America were in actuality outbreaks of what was then called consumption, but we now know as tuberculosis. There are many ways that science has given us a better understanding of the world around us. Two notable branches of science that have done this would be particle physics and quantum mechanics, both of which a student learns about at MCA. In his book, A Brief History of Time, renowned physicist Stephen Hawking discusses that these two branches of science and how modern-day scientists came to our current understanding of them. Hawking describes that in ancient times, people believed that the smallest thing in the universe to exist was the atom. With science, we now know that this is not the case, as there are subatomic particles like neutrons and protons, which are made up of quarks, which are possibly even comprised of even smaller particles. All of these, among various other subatomic particles, make up the building blocks of matter in the universe. It is fascinating that we are able to know and understand these minute details of the universe millions of years after their creation with the help of modern-day science and technology. Another interesting aspect of the universe that we are now able to better understand with science is orbital mechanics. Using scientific principles such as Newton's laws of motion and the universal laws of gravitation that students also learn about at MCA, scientists can calculate the orbits of the planets and other objects within the solar system. They can also predict both solar and lunar eclipses and land a rocket on the moon. All feats which would have been thought impossible centuries ago, yet are now achievable through science. However, while there are many previously unknown things that science has shed light on, there are many things in our world that science still seems to have no explanation for. Such things belong to the realm of the supernatural, and examples of this include the Loch Ness Monster, the Marfa Lights, and the legendary weeping statues, all of which are phenomena that have been investigated extensively and for which no scientific explanation can be found. For my interview, I had the privilege of talking to Adrian Shine, head of the Loch Ness and Mirror Project, and one of the foremost experts on both the Loch Ness Monster and Loch Ness. Though initially uncertain of there being a huge monster living within the depths of Loch Ness, which is what called him to found the Loch Ness and Mirror Project, he now no longer believes in there being the possibility of such a creature. Mr. Shine explained that, due to the murky waters of the loch, light only reaches about 4 meters deep, which does not allow for many plants to grow. Consequently, with so little vegetation, the ecosystem is not large enough to support a large creature living in the loch, like a plesiosaur, which many in the scientific community hold out for. However, the issue that arises is that while the Loch Ness Monster cannot seem to scientifically exist, there is not enough scientific explanations for the various sightings and phenomena that have been attributed to Nessie over the years. Though most Nessie sightings that are not ruled hoaxes are attributed to boat wakes, seals, otters, etc., Mr. Shine did admit that there was something to be said for the eyewitness testimony, and that most of which tends to be from good, honest people. Though there are still some who hold on to the belief that Nessie may be something akin to a plesiosaur, with a lack of scientific evidence, there are some who reason that the only explanation is that it is something of the supernatural realm. Something that unmistakably exists and has vexed scientists for decades is the Marfa Lights. The lights have been attributed to many things over the years, most notably car headlights and bioluminescence, which is caused by natural gases in the air. However, the first reports of the Marfa Lights came from the Native Americans, who believed they were the spirits of their ancestors, and later by the ranchers who settled in that area. Both of these were long before the advent of electricity, much less the car, ruling out the first attribute. As for the second, researchers have found no traces of the chemicals necessary to cause the bioluminescence hypothesized. Thus, the lights were also ruled by many to be something of the supernatural. Another strange incident with no scientific explanation is the Weeping Mary statue of Las Cruces, New Mexico. Though the weeping statue phenomena is not a new one, and the Catholic Church has ruled many cases fraudulent, such was not the case with the Our Lady of Guadalupe statue in Las Cruces. On Pentecost of 2018, parishioners at Our Lady of Guadalupe Catholic Church noticed that there appeared to be tears streaming from the face of a Virgin Mary statue there. It was then discovered that the tears were actually a chemical composition known as chrism, which is used in Catholic churches in sacraments such as baptism. Upon extensive investigation, there was found to be no evidence of tampering, as there had been a security camera nearby, and the inside of the statue was found to be hollow and empty. It was then ruled a miracle by the Archdiocese of New Mexico. Science, when applied correctly, is a good thing that can help us better understand the wonderful and unique world God made for us. But science can only be taken so far, and when it reaches its limits, we should be more inclined to consider a supernatural explanation, as the supernatural and miraculous are just as much a part of creation as the natural and explained. Thus, science and the supernatural can both help us better understand the world God created. Thank you.
All right. First part's over. So, just to kind of start us off, catch us up. So, what's in store for you next year?
Next year, I'm going to the University of St. Andrews in Scotland to study Scottish history.
Okay. Not exactly something you hear many MCA students say. So why there? Why do that?
Because I've always really liked history, especially Scottish history, and I really like the University of St. Andrews, and it's the oldest one in Scotland.
Okay. So why now? Why did you choose this topic for your thesis?
Well, we went to Loch Ness a couple summers ago when we were visiting Scotland, and I started reading about the Loch Ness Monster, and so I know I wanted to do something involving that for my thesis.
Okay. So, two words you use frequently within this is supernatural and superstition, and for me personally, I hadn't really thought through, I guess I haven't been in situations where I've tried to think through what's the difference. Can you kind of explain to us what supernatural is, what superstitious is, if they're the same, if they're different?
They're kind of different, though some superstitions do involve the supernatural, like beings that are supernatural would be like God and like angels and demons and that kind of thing. And then superstition is like a belief, usually involving the supernatural. Though like some superstitions, like in the theater, we can't say Macbeth before a show or like in the theaters because it's like bad luck, and so that's a superstition.
That's fair. I tried to wear the same outfit for every Tech basketball game, so I understand. Understand completely. So I guess for things like this, we have these superstitions. How do we distinguish what is real and what is not?
I guess a good place would be to start like with the Bible, what's true within the Bible, or just what's true like that and then going off of that.
Okay. So what makes the Bible unique? Because I mean, I've had some conversations in college. I remember that it was brought up. I guess I should have had the superstition, supernatural conversation in my brain then. But you kind of hear like it's filled with, just a bunch of superstitions. You can't prove anything. Why believe in the Bible then and not believe in vampires or something?
Well, superstitions like vampires, it's just kind of a belief, and it might be rooted in like some fact or just something made up, but the Bible is mostly like a historical account, and like there's other factors outside that back it up. So that's
okay. I think one of the things that stuck out to me is that your topic made me do a lot more research, because there's a lot I realized I had never thought through. And in looking through supernatural and superstition, it seemed like supernatural has reason. So God, we believe in God because there's a reason for him. Superstitious often doesn't really have a reason. Like why the lights of, why are there lights popping up in Marfa? We don't know. And so it's often seems like we're trying to connect things. Do you think there's any modern superstitions out there that are, or people claim to be supernatural? Are there any out there that that you can think of that we are doing that we're just trying to connect with our reason, like it must be this or it must be that, but don't really have reason for it?
not like a very universal one that I can think of.
Let's do Marfa, because I just said that and you brought that up. So with Marfa Lights, why do you think, which I haven't been able to see it myself, I've always planned to go try and see, but why do you think, if it is supernatural, what would the purpose of it be? Or do you think there is one?
I honestly don't know. Is because I've seen the Marfa Lights, and there's no scientific explanation. They move around and they come at you and they change colors and they go together and go apart, and it's not there. It's not anything scientific, but it's there, and I wouldn't know what the purpose of it would be. Okay.
So I think one of the interesting parts that you mentioned in your paper. So you say there are many things in this world, and it kind of fits what you were just saying here, that science still seems to have no explanation for. Such things belong to the realm of the supernatural, and examples of this include Loch Ness, Marfa Lights, and the weeping statues. If we are without scientific explanation, so if we experience something like Marfa Lights and we cannot explain it, does that automatically make it supernatural?
Not necessarily, but there is the possibility that it is, but a lot of people don't necessarily go to that possibility.
Okay.
Consider it.
So when do we, or do we ever, when do we hit a point where we can definitively say this is supernatural and this is superstition?
I guess when there's something that you can't have a scientific, or there's no other explanation, and it's there, then that's when.
Okay.
So, and I'm a little out of my wheelhouse, probably out of the two others here. When talking about science, I haven't had a science class since probably, I don't know, 14 years ago. So, but it's still fascinating. And in thinking about this, do you think, is there a limit to science?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's what do you mean? Do you think there's a limit to science in, I guess, on its own, or science in our ability to understand?
Science and our ability to understand, because we're human and we won't be able to understand everything that there is.
So do you think we've hit our limit as a society?
No.
Do you think we'll ever hit a limit?
Maybe.
Okay. How would we, hypothetically, because you're saying we haven't hit the limit, I'd probably agree with that because we're learning new stuff all the time. But how would we ever know? Would we ever know if we hit that we know all science?
I don't know if you would be able to, is because there's just like a lot of different branches of science, and like, so you might hit the limit in one, but you could still see that there's more to learn about in like a different one, like a different branch of science.
Okay. So I'll do one more question and I'll pass it on. This is an interesting thing that I had the conversation with someone not too long ago, and they were talking about, I think it was ghosts or something, along the superstition lines. And one of the interesting things that someone said, and it kind of stuck out to me, and it just popped into my brain yesterday when thinking about this, is there any harm to believing a superstition?
I think there can be, maybe not just with believing it, but what you do with the superstition. For instance, like with the Salem witch trials, it was really big in like Europe to like believe in witches, even if there wasn't any like basis for saying that this person, like, oh, this is my neighbor, they're a witch. And then of course like a bunch of people died from that, because, so I think that would be an example of that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey.
Hey.
All right. So, I guess, like, what's the motive behind superstitious people, like, in general? Like, what do they want, or what are they trying to do? Because a lot of people who are superstitious, like, it just looks goofy. Like, they're just doing goofy stuff. So, like, what's the motive?
I think it would be they don't have like an explanation, or they don't know what causes something or why something is, so they're just coming up with belief to how that is.
So you think it's just fear of the unknown, or can it ever be like, can you be superstitious towards something that's like good, or can you have a good superstition? Like, are superstitions always created like out of fear? Just like, I guess, yeah.
I don't think they're all necessarily caused by fear. I think it's just a not knowing and then coming up with an answer for something.
So what do you think is like an example of a good superstition?
I can't think of anything right now. I'm like only thinking of bad ones, but I like there are them out there.
Yeah, just like some sort of ritual to like promote good or something like that. Do you think a superstition like towards a good thing like can be harmful also? So like we talked about the Salem witch trials and stuff like that, but do you ever think being superstitious like towards some good end can be harmful also?
Possibly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I I don't know, that's the weird thing. Like, a superstition is difficult because it's like, instead of having a relationship with the supernatural, it's like you're making a pact with it. It's like you're keeping it at arm's length. Like, I'll do my part, you do your part. You know, you stay in that corner, I stay in this corner, and like that's going to be it. We're not going to go any further. And so, like, how do you have a relationship with the supernatural instead of just like turning it into a superstition where it's like, I'm going to keep you at arm's length, and we're not going to go any further? Like,
I guess trying to better understand what you're dealing with, like seeing if there is other explanations than whatever superstition you've come up with, to see if that would be one way of going about it.
what are some, like, I guess, like, practical steps of doing that? Because the unknown seems like really big and infinite and terrifying, and so it's like, how do you break that into little, like, you know, manageable chunks sort of thing?
Yes, like maybe first seeing if there's anything like a scientific or natural, like physical explanation for what it is, and then turning to the Bible and seeing if there's anything in the Bible that pertains to it. I think that would be.
Yeah. For sure. Do you think that superstitions can ever inspire, like, wonder in people?
How do you mean, wonder?
So, I guess, like, where superstition can maybe give, like, motivate somebody, like, to want to form a relationship or investigate, like, maybe the supernatural side of the world more, or does a superstition, like, always, you know, kind of set on avoiding the supernatural sort of thing?
No, there are, like, a lot of people who, for instance, like, go ghost hunting.
Yeah.
So there's that, and, like, people want to go, there's, like, a lot of Bigfoot, like, people that go after Bigfoot and that kind of, and, like, other cryptids.
Yeah. So how do you think that can lead to somebody, like, thinking about a bigger picture idea than just kind of, you know, a ghost hunt for a lot of, you know, it's just an adrenaline rush or something like that? And so how do you think it leads to, like, discovering something greater?
Just thinking about, like, why is it that, like, the thing that I'm going after, why would it exist, and, like, how would it exist? That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Cool. I'm going to pass the mic to Mr. Schumann.
That could have been really bad. How to kill 3 tutors publicly. Psh. Walked under a ladder today. All right, Cailin, I'm going to be a little bit all over the place on this. I'm not sure what rhyme or reason comes out of the pattern of these questions. Some of it's going to be following what Mr. Reed asked. Could you define supernatural for us?
Supernatural is something that's kind of, like, not natural. That's like a bad explanation, but
It's not wrong, but
it's kind of something that's, like, not exactly of the physical world, but
okay, so something that's not exactly of the physical world. Can you define superstitious?
Superstition is, like, a belief. It's just, like, a belief in something, even if there's no basis for that belief in fact.
Okay, so superstition is a belief in something, whether or not there's any basis for that. Okay, good. Are supernatural and superstitious, is the supernatural and the superstitious similar in any ways?
Yes, because you can have a superstitious belief in something that is supernatural.
Okay. Can you have a superstitious belief in something that's natural or?
I suppose, like, with the, like you said, you walked under a ladder, that's a superstitious belief, but there's, like, nothing supernatural about it. So I think that would be that.
And that'd be like Mr. Reed wearing his lucky socks for tech. So, shouldn't have washed them. How are they distinct? How's the supernatural and the superstitious distinct? Because it doesn't sound like they're total synonyms. So how are they different?
Well, like I said, the superstition is like a belief, and then the supernatural can be something like an angel that is like a being.
So the superstitious is a belief, and then the supernatural has a real existence in something that's there. It's just not like quantifiably concrete. So is Christianity, do you think it's more of a superstitious religion or a supernatural religion? Like what's its foundation?
I think its foundation would be in the supernatural.
Okay. Does it have any foundation in the natural as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right. My next question is explain those things. So why is Christianity a supernatural and a natural religion and not a superstitious religion?
Because Jesus like walked among us, and he was man, and so he was like physical, and like you can go supposedly where he was buried or where he was born, but he was also fully divine, and he performed miracles.
So that would be making it grounding it in the natural and the supernatural. Why not the superstitious?
Because it's more of there was like accounts of this is what happened, like he turned water into wine, and it's not, my grandmother says that she saw Jesus turn water into wine, that kind of thing,
So it's based on things that people actually saw that fit within the natural flow of things, or were a clear, miraculous violation of those things. I mean, I can look back at my own life, and I probably still have some of these like Christian superstitions. I mean, can Christians, or I mean, I guess it's a human thing, because you mentioned that at the beginning of your paper that I'm trying to see where exactly it is, but just you mentioned in there that human beings have this tendency towards trying to explain away that which they don't have a rational way of doing it. I mean, as Christians, can we make, or how do Christians make their religion superstitious? May have been a bad question. So, I mean, for me, I think of just like where Jesus says, don't pray as the pagans do, just giving these empty rote prayers, just thinking that they'll be answered because I prayed in this way, or I behaved in a certain way, and so I'm going to get a certain thing out of that. And so, granted that Christians can have superstitious behaviors, are they following God when they do that? Am I following God when I have my Christian superstitions?
I think if you're doing that, you're like at least trying to follow. You're still trying to follow God. You're not like trying to go against Him.
Okay. And does that have any merit? Does that give me any traction towards the things that I want when I do that?
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah. It just depends on what it is.
Okay. My next question, doing a big switcheroo here. A lot of the way that you sounded like in kind of defining some of the supernatural, or the way that your examples tended to go, is you have a supernatural explanation for something, and then science later replaces that. And so, for instance, like with vampires or with Loch Ness, you have this. And so supernatural is kind of that which we can't explain, or that which is yet to be scientifically explained. Do you think that could be dangerous to say, okay, well, we believe in angels until science disproves them.
Well, I think there's some things that science won't ever be able to prove, like angels. But I guess it could be harmful to say, like, have that kind of thinking.
Okay, should we start with a supernatural foundation and believing and accepting the world as it is, or should we start with a natural?
I would say start with, like, a natural, so you don't, like, think of some, like, weird superstitious thing, but, like, start with the natural, and then if it doesn't have any explanation, go to a supernatural.
Okay. And then my last question before I pass it back to Mr. Reed. Do you have any superstitions?
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, like I said, I do, like, a lot of theater stuff, and we're very superstitious, so you can't say, like, good luck, you have to say break a leg, and then you can't say Macbeth, like, and some people are just like, you don't say Macbeth if you're, like, doing a show, and then some people are like, you can't say it if you're on the grounds of the theater at all, or you'll get, like, a dirty look, and, like, that's happened to me. It was an accident, but yeah.
What do you do when you're playing Macbeth?
That's like the one exception. If you're, like, doing the play Macbeth, you can say it in the play, or if it's, like, written in a line, then you're, like, fine. But if you just say it, like, as a conversation, or if you're saying, hey, we're doing Macbeth next week, then you can't do that.
So we're doing that play, which shall not be named.
It's usually referred to as the Scottish play.
That's right, yeah. And, yeah, Loch Ness and
Yeah.
all the other stuff. Good.
Next time I go to a play, that's going to be in my mind the whole time. I'm going to want to say it so bad. So one of the interesting sentences in your conclusion that you threw out there, that it didn't stick out until this afternoon when I was rereading again, and I was curious what this looks like, where you say science, when applied correctly, is a good thing that can help us better understand the wonderful and unique world God made for us. So you added that when applied correctly. What does science applied incorrectly look like?
That would be, like, the Holocaust, when they were doing, like, these certain people groups are, like, genetically inferior, and, like, the Darwinian evolution that went, like, along with that was when science was applied incorrectly.
Okay, so science for good, not for bad. Okay, that makes sense. So you have a lot of people watching, either here in the audience or maybe online. What do you hope from this time together that they'd take from this?
Well, our culture is very scientifically inclined. Like, there has to be a scientific explanation. So maybe in the future, if they're like, hey, this thing that I've seen or, like, heard about doesn't have a scientific explanation, maybe there's something supernatural to it.
So that we should be more open to the idea of supernatural. That makes sense. Typically, if something we can't explain happens, we're kind of afraid to tell people for fear of criticism or something. So, do you think there's anything that mankind is going to look back on in 200 years? Can you think of anything maybe in 200 years that mankind's going to look back and go, what were we thinking, superstitiously?
I don't know. It could be, like, the sports thing.
Okay,
just
yeah.
like that, like, but I don't know. You never know what's gonna, like, happen in 200 years and how the world will be. So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we don't know how science is going to advance too. We might find out some really crazy things. Do you think there's any, can you give me any examples of any kind of widely held superstitions that maybe large groups of people all kind of hold to?
I think another one of those, like, would be the whole sports things where, like, a lot of people like sports and they all, like, have, like, oh, if I wear, like, this jersey or these socks or whatever, like, this will help my team win. And then other stuff like like, if you see a black cat, like, that's bad luck, or, like, don't walk under a ladder, and, like, those kinds of things.
Okay, so...
Those are,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
those are just, like, widely held by, like, a lot of people.
Okay. Why do you think we do that? Explain my crazy to me.
I don't remember what the term for it is, but there is a term in psychology that's like, our brains naturally link stuff even if there is no, like, real, it's just like a coincidence and there's no real link. And I think it's that, like, our, like, brain's natural, like, linking things.
Do you think there's something kind of naturally planted in us by God that inclines us this way? That maybe sometimes we use for right, sometimes we abuse or misuse, or is that something God's kind of put in us? Or
if he put, like, curiosity into us when he was making us, I think that's what that would be.
Okay.
Just we're naturally curious a lot.
Now to switch gears. What would you say your high point of MCA is, other than this, obviously?
I really like teaching world history. I like being a senior assistant for that class because I really like the world history classes, and teaching that has really been fun.
Why do you like history? Because for some they're like, history, no.
I just
Why?
think it's really cool. Like, it's fun to learn about stuff. I just really think it's cool, so, yeah.
Did it break your heart with the news yesterday?
Of Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Well, no, see, it's because, like, cathedrals burn down, like, a lot. Like,
it's true. That's true.
Like, I mean, it's because, like, yeah, it's sad, and they had, like, a lot of artifacts and stuff, and, like, but that's just, like, there's, like, when you go and you learn about cathedrals, like, all of them have had, like, caught on fire at one point. So, like, I mean, really. And, like, they're gonna rebuild. It's, like, Notre Dame. So, like, it's the biggest cathedral in France. So, they're gonna rebuild it, obviously. So, yeah.
Do you think this is kind of improv question, because I wasn't expecting this at all, but when you started answering, it popped in my head. One of the interesting things is the moment that, so with this particular story, the moment the fire happened, the internet, which is an amazing tool but also scary at times, immediately erupted with, it happened because of this, it happened because of that, and it was this, and it was that. Do you think the seed that leads to superstition might also lead to things like that? Is there any kind of connection there?
I think so, yeah. It's because I thought they didn't, like, know what caused the fire, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
About people saying, oh, it happened because of that. So
I think it's more people saying, like, oh, it was a hate group, or oh, it was terrorists, or oh, it was someone threw a cigarette out and smokers are the worst. And, you know, just it's all these different, you know, things. People immediately jump and think, it must be this. What do you think's happening in those people that makes them want to do that?
I think it's just, like, our curiosity and thinking of, like, what usually causes fire is, like, a cigarette, or there's been the, like, riots and protests and people setting things in fire in Paris for, like, the past, I don't know, month or so. So, like, it's, like, what most likely caused this thing to happen. and then thinking, oh, it was this or oh, it was that. And I think that's what caused them to do that.
Okay.
So at the end of your paper, you go into like 3 different examples of supernatural occurrences or things we used to believe were supernatural, and you talk about the Marfa Lights and then the weeping statue of Mary and then the Loch Ness monster. And so I kind of had different questions about each of those. So I guess I'll start with the Marfa Lights. Why do the Marfa Lights like not make us mad? Like, humans hate puzzles that we can't solve. Like, I stay up at night thinking about things or situations that it's like I don't know what to do, and like, rack my brain over it. And kids come to my office with problems they can't solve every day, and they're frustrated, and it makes them mad. And so like, why do people go stare at Marfa in awe, and like, why aren't a bunch of angry people? Why hasn't it made people angry?
I mean, it might, but I think it's just kind of like, oh, it's lights. There they are. They're gone. They're doing their thing. It's just kind of like lights. So it's not like threatening or anything like that. It's just like, oh, hey, there's some lights, and then, oh, they're gone. And yeah.
Do you think that like they should care more, sort of thing? I mean, since it's been going on for forever and we still haven't figured it out, like, should we care more, or is it okay to leave it as it is?
I think it's okay to leave it as it is. They're just kind of there. They're not harming anyone, Just leave them be.
Nice. All right, let's go with the statue of Mary. So I guess, like, what sort of framework should we use to interpret that? Because, I mean, so the statue's weeping, and we don't really have an explanation, like, for why, and you said the cameras don't really pick up anything, and the statue is hollow. And so, like, the problem is, I see that, you could interpret the weeping different ways. You could interpret it as an omen, or you could interpret it as a blessing. Like, you could say she's weeping for, the world's going to hell, and, like, everything's bad, and, it's gotten worse since her time, and so, she's weeping out of despair, and it's an omen about, the direction the world's headed. Or, is it a blessing that she's weeping? Have we actually, done good? And, she's weeping for joy in some senses. So, like, I mean, the Bible, would probably leave, there's no, like you said earlier, we can use the Bible to help us, interpret things like that, but that one's kind of, there's not really a biblical direction telling us how to interpret it. So how do, like, something that's kind of a toss-up like that, how do you interpret if it's an omen or a blessing?
I guess if it's like omen, you might not be able to like tell that beforehand, but if it's like the statue starts crying and then like a week later there's like the Notre Dame fire or something, then you would be able to. But if nothing bad happens, then I guess you could be like, oh, I guess that was a blessing.
It's like, if you can't tell, then like, what's the proper response? Or if we get to the point where like, well, we can never really be sure why it's happening or if it is good or bad, and so like, what's the proper response then?
I guess just to see if there's anything you can learn from it, from the experience.
Yeah. Do you think that confirmation bias plays a role in how people interpret things like that too? So there's a certain way they want to interpret it, or there's something they want to believe, and so we as a group decide to interpret it based on that instead of actually looking at what's happening a little more objectively, maybe.
Yeah.
And so how do you think we can kind of like strip that away, like our confirmation bias away?
I think some people might be more inclined to the confirmation bias, so they might have more difficulty with that. But I think just kind of like trying to like rationally think about it and like keep a level head might help with that.
Yeah. And I guess so like confirmation bias causes us to be like hasty in, picking an answer And I think another thing that makes people be hasty in arriving at some sort of answer is just the fact that we're impatient and want an answer in general, and sometimes we don't care what the answer is as long as like we have an answer and like let's get an answer and move on. And so how do you think we can be patient, like if we have to wait for an answer with some of those things and we just have to hold it in the I don't know stage for a while? How do we be patient instead of rushing to a conclusion?
I would say just kind of like maybe breathe a little bit, and then just like going over the facts and what you do know, and then thinking, okay, it could be this, it could be this. We don't necessarily know, and just maybe being like okay with like I don't know about this right now, and maybe one day I'll find out about it. Maybe one day I won't, but like you just have to be okay with saying I don't know.
What's something like that you don't know right now that you still see as beautiful?
I guess with Loch Ness, like I don't really know what exactly is in there, but it's a very beautiful lake to go to.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. Have you ever gotten to go?
Yeah, we went to Scotland 2 years ago, and I was able to go to Loch Ness.
That's awesome.
It was really pretty.
That's cool. All right, so that's actually the last thing I wanted to ask you about. So with the Loch Ness Monster, like, I don't know, like it's kind of become like a mythological or folklore sort of thing, and I guess it's probably based off of some sort of like, dinosaur, large lizard or something like that. And so that to some degree, like, made me think of Santa Claus for some reason. So the idea of Santa Claus is based off of a real person like Saint Nick, and so like the idea of the Loch Ness Monster is based off of dinosaurs that kind of taken to an extreme. And so why do we kind of like build up something to like that mythical like status? So we turn dinosaurs into Loch Ness monsters, or we turn Saint Nicholas into Santa Claus. Like, why do we build it up that way?
I think it's kind of like the game Telephone, where like it happened and then it gets just passed down, and like people like don't remember everything correctly, or they like embellish things, and that's how that happens.
Mm-hmm. What do you think people like are trying to like get out of that, or like what's the motive for doing it? Because I mean, like when you play Telephone, you have some people who do intentionally like change it, and they just like trolling everybody, but like why? But I mean, this one, it's like they kind of build it up to be larger than life sort of thing, and so I guess like what's the motive for that, instead of just enjoying it as it is?
I don't know, like you would be able to say that every single person like who's done that has like a motive to do so, other than just like to tell the story.
Yeah. Why do you think so? Like the Loch Ness Monster myth is kind of like stays in the realm of folklore now, or if it's told in a story, it's not necessarily presented as like this is a factual like monster that exists in the world. It's kind of they bracket it in folklore or mythology, but like somebody like Santa, like you present that like it exists in the real world as is right now. And so like why does something like that get carried over into the real world, and we don't bracket that and say this is a lie, or not a lie, but it's just it's an idea that we've created and propagate, versus like something like Loch Ness, where we tell people like this is folklore, it's a myth, like from the get-go.
I think because like Santa Claus like did exist at one point, and there was that, and then now he's just like a thing that you tell your kids. So like he's not exactly part of the real world, but like he's just but he like did exist, but then there's no proof of the Loch Ness Monster that it did exist at one point, like Santa Claus did.
Yeah. So how do you think like we decide to like collectively believe these large scale like myths sort of thing, or like why do we choose certain ones and just kind of get rid of others?
think oral tradition would be a big part of that, and then like Santa Claus was like something with like Christianity and just getting widespread through Europe and then through most places.
Mm-hmm. Which this is kind of a little different, but which mythical creature do you wish actually existed?
Probably the unicorn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. I like them, and they're
Nice.
they're not like particularly violent or anything.
Mhm.
They're just kind of like a horse, you know?
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. And then the last thing before I pass the mic on, another thing that this made me think about was like OCD, because OCD is kind of like superstitious because people have to have their world like just so, or they think everything's going to fall apart, but there's not necessarily maybe like that doesn't necessarily start with a supernatural element. And so like how is OCD like different than superstition? And then when does superstition like can it ever cross over into mental illness? Because a lot of OCD is considered like, there's a mental issue there.
Well, OCD is classified as a mental illness, and like there are people who are like, oh, I'm so OCD, I just like to have things exactly so, but like there are people with a real mental illness where it's like debilitating for them. And I guess one way like supernatural could bleed over into like something with the mental, it's not exactly mental illness, but like sleep paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of people describe seeing like a demon or something, like that's like very common for people to see with sleep paralysis, so I think that's one way.
Yeah. Is OCD just like a personal superstition, like a superstition only like held by one person, or is it different?
I think it's different because it's like actual like affliction people can have, though there are some people who are just like, I have it, but they're not actually diagnosed with it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
All right, I've got one comment and one question. Comment is after I pass the mic back to Mr. Reed, I put some connections together. So last year, Gabe Beatty broke his leg sliding into third base on the grounds here while he was in the midst of practicing for the play Macbeth. And that's the connection. So that's now been explained. All right, so my question for you is, as you're finishing up your time at MCA, how have you engaged minds, pursued Christ, and discovered greatness during your time here?
I think by helping out with my the world history class that I senior assist, and like teaching those kids. That's how I've done that.
Okay, how have you engaged minds in that? I can see that that's the arena that you've done that in, but how have you done that within that arena?
By like the normal stuff with the soccer method, where like you ask questions, but like also it's history, so usually it's told through like one lens, but like also being like, hey, there are other ways that people consider this.
So you've helped engage their minds through saying, here's the history, but here's other angles at it. Don't just take it at face value. That's good. What greatness have you discovered in history?
I don't know, just like helping teach, and then like I guess also with like RT, leadering and being a leader and mentoring kids, and then like doing the whole dissertation thing.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll pass it back to Mr. Reed. Or actually pass it to you.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Okay, my question for y'all was like, what is some superstitious belief that you have? Like, I have the Macbeth thing
So what is that for y'all?
Well, I've got a sports one as well. I mean, the Astros are on a 9-game winning streak. Don't want to break that as they're playing the Oakland Athletics tonight. And so, you watch sports and you're rooting for your team, especially when it comes time to things that are where it's like the playoffs or things matter at a greater deal. It's like I start noticing it and wanting, and I think it comes from wanting to belong to that team and saying, okay, here's my contribution to that. And so whether it's, I don't know, like what Mr. Reed said, wearing a particular shirt, sitting in a particular spot. Hey, you weren't in the room and my team was winning, and then you walked in here and now they're losing. Get out. So, I mean, those are some negative superstitions, but in another sense too, I mean, I think sometimes when in my own faith with God, of attributing things to saying, okay, God, I'm doing my part on this, therefore you need to deliver on that. And God in his grace pours grace upon grace for me, and sometimes rather than just receiving the goodness that God gives me, I'll start attributing that to things that I'm doing. And I mean, when I think of it, I mean, it's just as silly as wearing a t-shirt and so Jose Altuve hits a grand slam. Has nothing whatsoever to do with that. And yet wanting to make myself more important than what I am, and misunderstanding my relationship with God. I think sometimes I'll have those superstitions, and even though they may be good things that I'm doing, God loves me just the same, and the sun comes up on the wicked and the righteous, and I'm very grateful for that, because I'm not sure which side I'm on all the time.
I did forget to wear my hat on the championship game, and so superstitiously I feel guilty for losing the championship. Yeah. I mean, I would say kind of like he said, I think there's, and I think Christians fall into this all the time, there's this time where we interpret things as God giving us favor or punishing us for stupid stuff like, oh, green lights all the way, God loves me today, I did the right thing, or like, I mean, just dumb things. And I mean, it happens, and I don't think sometimes it's probably not even harmful to think it until you kind of unpack it theologically and start applying it elsewhere. It can become pretty harmful. But I mean, even like in moments where you're like in a rush because, well, I had a friend whose family member was in the hospital recently, and I needed to get there real fast. And there was no traffic. It was weird, and I was able to get there fast. And maybe it was God, but I feel like our inclination sometimes as supernatural people is we can delve into the superstitious and go, oh, it was because, you know, I did this thing, or God showed me favor or whatever, when really it was people were at home sleeping or whatever a lot of the time. So.
And mine's going to sound so dumb. Okay, so I have two of them. They're like these little pink squeaky cats, basically, at my house. Their names are Ernest and Nicole. Alec Corzine, who graduated last year, named both of them. And there's a lot of superstitions that we just do with them because it's goofy and fun. But one of them is that, like, when we're sick, or like me or my husband is sick, we get the cats to do laying on of paws of us, so that we will heal. And if we don't do that, it's like, well, we're still sick because we haven't done that yet. And so we have a little like laying on a pause ceremony with the cats whenever we're sick, and it helps out. So there you go. Sure, let me pray. Dear God, thank you for today. Thank you for Cailin. Thank you for bringing her just through her time at MCA. Thank you for guiding her to this topic and for just the thought and energy that she's put into it. I pray that you will help us to follow you, not out of fear or superstition or because we're making a pact with you, but I thank you that you're a personal God and we can develop a relationship with you. Help us to have the courage to do that. And I thank you for loving us where we are, and that you can teach us how to love others in the way you loved us. I pray that you'll bless the rest of our day. And I thank you for all the people who came here today to listen. In Jesus' name, amen.